voted for the second bill, at which point Chevanakam broke away and formed the Federal Party. Now, that was fairly prescient because he saw that these section of Tamils who are different, and I must say that I should add that that's another aspect of identity politics, that it doesn't even look at the complexity of the particular characteristic it's looking at. For example, ethnicity. The fact is that there are different Tamil communities in Sri Lanka. On the other hand, there is a lot of overlap also between communities because of intermarriage and movement and so on. So that is, these country Tamils are a fairly distinct community, different from the Jaffna Tamils. And there was not that much sympathy for them from the more upper caste, upper class, educated Jaffna Tamils. On the other hand, the left stood with these workers solidly. And N.M. Pereira, one of the leaders of the LSSP, he made a very strong statement about, they called it racialism at that point. And he said, I thought this kind of racialism which has been directed against these workers went out with Hitler and Timberland. And they voted against, of course, and campaigned against, unsuccessfully. But still, up to this point, there was the feeling that the left, as such, did not have a communal or ethnic tinge. It stood for all oppressed people. And that was carried through in 1953, where, again, this, a very elite party, on the advice of the World Bank, it tried to eliminate various subsidies and welfare measures, and especially the rice subsidy, which was a measure which had been implemented to ensure that nobody starved, basically. So this was directly hitting at the poor. And at that point, there was a mass outbreak, a hartal, a total work stoppage throughout the island, led by the left, which was so successful that, in fact, the measure was rescinded. The Prime Minister was forced to resign. And there have been criticisms saying that they could have taken it further. I don't want to enter into that debate. The point is that they achieved something which even today is quite difficult, namely to reverse an anti-working class measure. So this was a different kind of a politics which I'm talking about, socialist politics. There were many women's organizations in that. They did take up gender issues. They were active on working class issues. They took up joint struggles with workers of different castes. So on all these fronts, it was a very progressive force. Again, even in 1956, which was the next major battle, now by this stage, Bandaranaike had broken out of the UNP to form the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, SLFP, and totally, again, cynically, had made his slogan Sinhala only. Now, there had been earlier on a commitment to make both Sinhala and Tamil official languages rather than English. But he sidelined Tamil and made it Sinhala only, and this bill again was pushed through, which meant, especially for government employment, it would hit at Tamils especially hard. Also at burghers, many burghers left, in fact, left the island at that point. Burghers are people with European ancestry, but it also hit the Tamils. Again, at this point, the left fought it. They opposed it, and Colvinard make it a very, again, a very prescient statement, basically saying that if we have two languages, we'll have one united nation. one language could mean two bleeding little countries being torn apart. So this, so that was the situation up to 1956. So everyone felt that the left here represented no particular communal identity. But now, if you move forward to 65, 64, 65, now at that point, the left parties formed an alliance with the SLFP. And in a sense, that was the beginning of the end for socialist politics in Sri Lanka. At least that's how I see it. For example, there had earlier been an attempt by Bandaranaike trying to go back when he saw the kind of mayhem unleashed, the violence and mayhem unleashed by the Sinhala-only bill, because there were riots, there was violence. He tried to bring in an agreement with Devanaikam, allowing for the reasonable use of Tamil and for some devolution of power. That was opposed fiercely by the Sinhala nationalist, Sinhala chauvinist lobby. So he rescinded it, which was actually not good enough for them because they killed him in the end. So in 65, the UNP government, which was then in power, similarly tried to have a pact for the reasonable use of Tamil with Devanaikam. And this time the SLFP opposed it, and along with them, the left parties, which was a total betrayal of everything they had stood for, so vehemently earlier on. And I think at the beginning from this time, there was this feeling among Tamils that they had been abandoned, by the left. And of course, there were Tamil leftists who also felt homeless, in a sense. Shortly afterwards, the same government, a united front government in the 70s, was formed with the left, collaboration of the left, which went through with a whole lot of very discriminatory policies against students who were Tamil. They nationalized the plantations in a very brutal fashion, which again led to physical attacks on plantation workers. These policies, I think, were what gradually led to the genesis of Tamil nationalist. Not just the parties were there already, but to the militant movements, which formed the TULF and the militant groups which were formed at that time. So, yeah. Now at this time, then you had. So the Tamil socialists, I think some were silenced, basically. Didn't really have much to say. Others drifted towards Tamil nationalism. And that again was a very destructive tendency, because there too, right from the beginning, it was an extremely totalitarian, oppressive force within the Tamil community. I mean, one of the earliest actions was the killing of Alfred Budayappa in 75, Tamil mayor of Jaffna. And he was called a traitor because he believed that Sinhalese and Tamils could live together. He was not that he minimized or overlooked the kind of discrimination that Tamils faced. So I think at this point you have really the low point of almost the elimination of socialist politics, and with that you have more and more totalitarian policies occurring at the center. With Jayawardena coming to power in 77, he instituted the executive presidency, changed the constitution, basically wielded absolute power totally eliminated democracy, attacks on trade unions, freedom of expression, freedom of association, etc., was all crushed. And what the World Bank was not able to do in '53, it was able to do at this point. So you had huge cuts in welfare, living standards plummeted, and of course trade unions were not allowed to fight for workers, so there was no way of getting back. And by the, this was interrupted in '87 by the Indo-Lanka Accord. After '83, there was this major change because there was this huge anti-tunnel pogrom in '83, which basically changed the conflict into a civil war.